Okay, good morning. Today is March the 19th. This is the Budget and Finance Committee for the Recreation Centers of Sun City West. My name is Dick Rhodes, and I am the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee, and I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. So if you could please stand with us and pledge allegiance to the flag. We have established a quorum. As a matter of fact, all of our members here are here and present today. We have one of our committee members that is attending virtually. Lynn Kellis, are you still there by chance?
Yeah.
Good, thank you, Lynn. Okay.
Yeah.
So this morning, we have a very interesting agenda. We only have 4 items on the agenda, but all 4 of them I think are going to be, you'll find to be interesting. I want to present the minutes from March the 5th, and if there are any, if any objections, we're going to accept them as printed. Okay, so accepted. Okay. The very first item on our agenda is going to be our CFO, Cliff Swan, and he's going to provide a briefing on our February 2024 financial review. Cliff?
Good morning, Director Rhodes, and good morning, B&F Committee and community. Happy to be here today. We're going to start off with the February year-to-date financials, and then later on we'll talk some budget. So agenda topics today, this is kind of boilerplate stuff, but we're going to go through the financials compared to current month, compared to budget and prior year, and then year-to-date compared to budget and prior year. And then we're going to move from the income statement down to the capital portion, the operating portion of the income statement, down to the capital portion of the income statement. And then we're going to talk about, after we talk about that, we're going to get into the capital improvement spend, and then finally the reserve fund and the FFB. So with that said, we'll get started. So taking a look at the month of February, golf really nailed it in February, carried the day, which is a wonderful thing when we have good weather and this vibrant community is out taking advantage of the weather. It's a beautiful thing, not just in golf, really everywhere. But you can see that golf really carried the day. We had we struggled in the events department with our ticket sales. We're assessing that now to figure out what the disconnect is there. But did not have the revenue that we had budgeted or anticipated for the month of February. Now we got the spring concerts here in March that were very successful and sold out. So we anticipate March being much better, but it was a little tough on the events side for us in February. But that said, still finished 46,000 favorable for the month of February on the revenue side. And then looking at the expense structure, I mean, I'm not going to pat myself on the back or pat the finance team on the back, but pretty good budget on the expense side for the month. 31,000 favorable. Yeah. So overall, 77,000 favorable for the month of February. And then taking a look at prior year, 152,000 favorable. 231 on the revenue side, of course, anticipated increases in rates and those sorts of things, generating that additional. Also, golf rounds were up over prior year, in addition to the increase in the rates in the golf rounds. So that obviously pushed the revenue up as well. And then 79,000 unfavorable all budgeted for on expenses. Looking at year-to-date compared to budget, 75,000 favorable on the revenue side. You can see, again, kind of same highlights in the area of events. Ancillaries down due to the closures at the Sports Pavilion and Grandview. When it comes to rental revenue, that really impacted us. I will say that in that section as well is water rights revenue for Briarwood, and they've cut really back on the water that they're gaining from us, and that's really cut back on the revenue there. So that's also impacting that 30,000 unfavorable. But most of that is due to lack of that ancillary revenue for those closures. Grandview is a big driving range revenue course for us because it's close to the outside world. So we have a lot of non-owner members that go there and utilize that driving range. So when it was closed down, it really impacted the revenue stream there. Overall, on the expense side, 207,000 favorable on the expense side. Had some, some of the wages and benefits and taxes savings or 202,000 favorable is offset in the repairs and maintenance side for some of those outside landscape services that we're employing now. So that's not all repairs and maintenance isn't all unfavorable because of unexpected things. It's a reallocation of that expense. Some of it is salaries and wages. I'd say about 75,000 to this point year to date in February is attributable that to repairs and maintenance for some of the subcontracted landscape services that we're doing now. But overall, 207,000 unfavorable, even with an unexpected 202 in utilities. Also notable, of course, is the seed in landscape maintenance came in much more favorable at the tune of about 170,000. Overall, 282,000 favorable to budget. We're currently year to date operating at a 437 negative cash flow. We'll see that go from negative to positive in March, and we'll stay positive throughout the year and return a positive cash inflow through May. June will probably have a negative cash flow, but that's how the year should shake out. But we're doing pretty good. 282,000 favorable budget. If we carry that through the year, that would take our reserve fund injection from operations from a little over $1 million to almost 1.3 million, which would be good. And if golf continues, I mean, that could climb even further. Compared to prior year, 164,000 favorable with the year-to-date items that we talked about. Taking a look at the expense, the two big items on expense budgeted for, I will say, are wages and benefits. Well, utilities not budgeted for, unfortunately not anticipated, but not fully anticipated at least. Some of it was budgeted for, but overall, those are the two kind of heavy hitters year over year in terms of expense increases. All right, switching to the capital portion of the income statement. The things that happen within here impact the reserve fund directly. So if our investment, for example, if our reserve fund investments show positive or negative swings, those happen directly in the actual reserve fund account. So those are impacted directly in there. And then in terms of APFs go directly into the reserve fund in terms of paying for capital improvements directly and then going into the reserve fund to do that. So with that said, looking at APFs, favorable 38,000 compared to budget. And then on the reserve fund allocation, we're tracking right at budget. What we budgeted, that, like I said earlier, a little over $1 million budgeted to go into the reserve fund from operations. We're right at budget when it comes to that. Whatever's left over at the end of the year, that $282,000 that's currently favorable, if we carry that, if that ends up at $282 at the end of the year, that gets added to that $1 million from the reserve fund allocation, goes right into the reserve fund. So with that said, investment income, still tracking well compared to budget and compared to prior year, but $12,000 favorable to budget. Unrealized loss in that reserve fund of $228 through last week, pretty much made that ground up with what was going on in the market, going on in the reserve fund, but that's going to continue to fluctuate up and down. But that's where we ended up for the month of February. And then $147,000 unfavorable to budget due to that unrealized loss in the reserve fund. Taking a look at prior year, you can see that reserve fund had an unrealized loss of $747. Did much worse for the month. So favorable there at 500 plus thousand. But APF fees really a good driver here and a good indicator of what's going on, and 67,000 favorable compared to prior year on APF fees. 533,000 favorable compared to prior year overall. Looking year to date, APF fees doing very well, 400,000 favorable. Again, that goes right into the reserve fund. So that 412,000 goes right into the reserve fund, which is awesome. So with that said, income, our investment income as well, 278,000 right in the reserve fund. Unrealized loss, we've carried that for the year at 250. Unrealized gain, realized loss of 250. We used to report those together, realized and unrealized. We had a request to break those out, so we are doing that now. And 250,000 year to date of realized loss, and 592,000 of unrealized gain in the reserve fund. Overall, 1.2 million favorable to budget. Compared to prior year, overall 1.4 million favorable. Same areas of increases. APF fees, 651,000 favorable, and then reserve fund investment realized and unrealized gains. Talked about it. APF fees, 251,000 favorable to prior year. Reserve fund valuation change, we're up $1 million over prior year, and then investment income, if you add that to the increase in valuation, 1.3 million in the reserve fund ahead of prior year. So year to date, overall revenue over under expenses were 1.2 million versus negative 338 at a almost $1.5 million favorable change in there compared to budget, and then 1.6 million favorable compared to prior year. Okay, switching gears, looking at the capital improvements, capital expenditures. So the funds, basically the capital improvements, what we use the reserve fund for, and all of those impacts that go into the reserve fund. We're going to talk about that now. So looking at the budget, was a smaller year in capital improvements because no irrigation project this year. So $5.5 million this year in capital improvements. That's generally what we track at, which is mainly just reserve fund things that come up every year. So at $5.5 million, and then currently tracking at a favorable variance that at $5.5 million, a little over $500,000. So tracking at $5 million on the 5.5 budgeted, which again, if those funds don't get spent, just like in the operating budget, those funds go directly back into the reserve fund. Okay, so they're not they're reflected in the reserve fund, but they don't get spent. So we don't use those funds for something else. They stay in the reserve fund. So a $500,000 positive reserve fund impact. Looking at the individual capital projects that were approved in last year's budget, you can see where each one of these projects, which ones are completed, which are identified by the highlighted in yellow, and then which ones have been PO'd and are awaiting completion. And a breakdown of what makes up the savings of roughly $520,000. Okay, so part of our capital budget, in addition to the $5 million, was $400,000, in allowance funds. So with that said, $268,000 of that spent, and a detail of what those items are listed here. And we're going to talk about allowances a little bit later when we talk about the $18 an hour and what we could do there for next year to save. But so looking at the reserve fund impact and the FFB percent, incorporating all the items here, all the favorables, looking at 49% right on budget in terms of the FFB percent, which is reflected in the modeling for the budget. And Director Rhodes, that concludes my February presentation, financial presentation.
Cliff, I have one question for you before I ask the committee members to. Do you have any idea why Briarwood has decreased their water consumption from us?
I think I think it was had some favorable water tables. And I'm not sure, other than that, what that could be attributable to. I heard they weren't watering certain sections of their course to mitigate some deturfing type scenarios. So,
okay, I'd like to open it up to committee. Anyone in the committee has a question? Mr. Bosak.
I had that same one, so thanks for the answer. The events decrease, is that something that's going to carry through the rest of the year and by month, or is there something in place that's going to kind of work toward offsetting that?
We're analyzing that now. I would say that we're not going to make up that full deficit.
Is it weather related to some degree?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I just think it's ticket sales are down.
And then the last one,
and we are analyzing that.
The almost $1 million worth of golf maintenance equipment that still looks like not much activity. Is that availability issues? Is that why that's still untapped?
Yeah, it usually takes a while to get that equipment in from Toro. So whatever doesn't get spent, it's kind of typical. We encumber some of that stuff. I'm not sure what the exact timeline is on it. Todd's not here, but I can get that answer for you, what he's thinking those purchases will be made.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Rhodes. You might have mentioned this while I was scribbling other notes. If so, I apologize. In terms of the overall APF, our trends for the year, we've been enjoying some good trends to this point. Is it projected to continue to the? And again, yeah. I'm not asking you. I know you don't have a crystal ball, sure. But best, your estimate right now, do you expect it to hold, or was that a temporary increase? I
do. Last year, we finished the year at a little over 1,100.
Right.
If you carry out the increase that we've had, which hasn't been huge, I think there's a 12 or 14 APF difference number of transfers year to date. If you carry that same percentage forward, we'll end up the year at about 1,130. So I anticipate being 1,100, which is what we did last year.
Yeah.
Last year we kind of rallied at the end of the year, and so hopefully we'll continue that trend.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Parsons.
Yes, on slide 22, 23, the capital projects, the projected variance of about $500,000. What are some of the major reasons for that?
The biggest driver of that was stabilization not needed at R.H. Johnson. I would say that's the biggest So the lack of need, the budgeted contingency for stabilization, because of some of the other areas of the parking lots that we had, we put that in the budget, and it came back after the analysis that we didn't need the stabilization that was put in the budget, which was pretty significant. So I would say that that's the biggest driver. So the projected variances are kind of in that first column, so you can kind of see R.H. Johnson, $144,000. There is a $200,000 savings in a shoreline repair project. Instead of taking the split faced wall and encasing that lake, Todd decided to do a riprap and a water treatment, which came in significantly favorable at $200,000 in that project. I will also say that in that project, we not only did we save $200,000, but we also got $105,000 from Arizona Office of Tourism, which isn't reflected in the savings, but we also got an additional $105,000 funding for that project. You're welcome.
Mr. Brignato?
Thank you, Dick. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Makes us feel like we're actually doing something worthwhile here. For those watching online, I am Frank Bagnato. Slide 8, I've got a question about golf. Eight.
Yeah, I'm working there. There we go.
There we go. So 158,000 in the black with golf for February year to date, considering that we lost a lot of rounds through the winter because of rain. Cliff, can you comment on where that 158,000 might have come from?
Rounds. So when we budgeted last year, we budgeted 315,000 rounds based on, we were tracking at the time through March when we landed on that budget number, we were tracking 6,000 rounds less than the prior year. So we really rallied in April, May, and June last year on golf rounds, which we finished the year at a little over 320,000 rounds last year. The prior year we had finished at 326,000 rounds.
Okay.
So I think we finished, it might have been like 323 last year. So anyway, through March when we were putting the budget together, golf rounds were looking pretty, I don't know if you remember, Gary, I mean, we had a lot of conversations about it. I mean, we had really been impacted by the weather. So when we put the budget together, we based it on 315,000 rounds. Based on prior year, we had a lot more rainouts in the prior year. So when we did the budget, those decrease in rounds from the prior year are reflected in those months that we had a lot of rain, which we didn't have this year. We had some, but nothing like we had last year.
Do you think that any of that positive variance may have been due to increases in greens fees, which perhaps now have been proven to not be necessary? And I'm bringing it up because we're looking at another increase in greens fees in the projected budget that we're going to be looking at today.
So the increase in revenue is a product of increase in green fees that is budgeted. So the rounds increase is what's driving the variance to budget.
Okay.
And then as far as this year goes, we are budgeting roughly 320,000 rounds in this year's operating budget, in FY25's operating budget, which is 5,000 more than we had budgeted last year.
Okay, then I've got one more question. This is on slide 12. And unless, perhaps I heard it wrong, but wages and benefits this year versus last year was 755,000 ahead of last year. Is that how that reads?
755,000 expense higher than
Higher.
prior year, yes.
Got it. So when you made the comment that this was budgeted for, it's budgeted in the current year. We're not 755,000 ahead of budget. It's just compared to the prior year.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Kellis, do you have anything to ask?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any, is anyone in the room, do they have a question? Okay, when you come down, please identify yourself and your rec card number, please.
Oh, I like to get my steps in, girl. Jolene Piaskowski, 132268. On the events, I know I came in late, but I know you guys budgeted to make $250,000, correct, on events?
I think it was about 280 for the year.
So it shows that we're $61,000 down, but that's because we haven't sold ticket sales, correct? Or how, I mean, I don't see, we have an income, but I don't see an expense for events.
So we track the events and we book it net. So we book net revenue. So the net revenue, or the gross revenue, really, is for the year is roughly 280,000, and we're tracking currently. If we carried that deficit, we would do gross revenue, which is the ticket sales minus all the costs that go into that, other than labor, internal
Right.
labor. We would generate a gross profit of 220 versus a budgeted gross profit of 280.
So could it be that the ticket prices are high? Does that mean that we're not selling our
We're
concerts
analyzing
out?
that. Yeah, so it could be the acts. We're in the process of taking a look at that. March is our biggest month as well, so we'll see how things shake out in March. We know, because we sell tickets ahead of time, how March is tracking. So I think we're set to be on budget for March, maybe a little ahead, but we're analyzing that now.
So I'm just trying to understand. So actually, our events is not considered an amenity to our community. It's considered an income for our community. Is that correct?
Yes, however, when we do free events, we offset that event's revenue by that. So, for example, when we hold an event where there's only cost and no ticket sales, that goes against the event's revenue account.
So
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to say that it's not an amenity, because when we have, this is part of the environment that we're trying to create here in Sun City West, where we have offerings that are targeted to the homeowners. And at these, I don't think there's any argument this would be at a reduced price. So the very fact that we have them at a reduced price, but we also, in that same bucket, we have free events. So we don't have a profit loss here. This is basically an amenity that's offered, and what Cliff is reporting on is the revenue that's generated from that.
but most, I mean, not most, but a lot of our free events have sponsors, correct? Like Sizzling Summer, that has a sponsor.
What are you trying to get at
Oh,
here?
I'm just
Because
wondering-
what we're trying to do is to explain the revenue, the cost, and how it has dropped. Now there
Okay.
are contributing factors like sponsors. They're probably relatively insignificant in the greater scheme of things, but there are sponsors and all that. But this is all part of the overall funding and the overall intent to try to offer amenities to our homeowners here. So, but there is no profit loss statement here. This is an amenity that's offered, and we measure the revenue that we get from that, not just from the ticket sales, but from all of our sources.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is Pete Finelli. The expense for the box office is not within, I think Cliff knows this, but I want to just clarify. Top part has the ticket sales and the cost of the event. That's what's showing up on the revenue side. Expenses for 2 or 3 box office staff, portions of Casey are all on the expense side. So there's not this $250,000 profit going on there. So
Just a matter of clarification, Pete Finelli is a staff person and he's a financial analyst.
Chris Waller, 140558. I think it was last month, we were talking about APF, and there was some discussion about trying to analyze how many of our sales were cash sales.
Yeah.
I don't expect you to have an answer right now. Is that moving forward, or are we finding out we can't do that?
Yeah, we really can't do that because we're not part of the closing process. We do get closing documents sometimes, but we're not privy to if they finance or pay cash on all the transactions. So
I thought it'd be interesting, but I was a little worried about that, how we're going to pull that off.
yeah.
Hi, Mr. Swan.
Hi.
I'm Sue Ambler, 129848. Just a question, will you be also looking at perhaps increases in offerings from places like Boomers, Zimmergy, things like that versus, because I know my husband and I have made a decision not to go to any of the concerts because we're finding our needs met through these other clubs. And so I don't know whether or not that will be something that you can look at and, and see, but I'm just,
Yeah.
throwing that out.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I want to be clear, and Pete talked about this earlier. What's reflected in the year-to-date revenue for special events is gross profit. It doesn't reflect in-house labor that it takes to sell those tickets, so the personnel. But I will say the cost, the act cost, the cost of the ticketing system, that is all offset in there. So if we make less revenue than we budgeted, it's not like we have more cost. You see what I'm saying? So we anticipated that we would sell more tickets to the events that we had planned. We have not done that. Some of that was weather related early because of the heat in September, October when we had events, the heat that we had. So that really put a damper on it as well. So, but overall, it's not terrible news. We just made less money than we thought we would.
Right. And then one more thing. Some of the people in my neighborhood, if they aren't able to get up to the rec center to purchase their ticket, they're freaked out about doing online. So I know I've gone around and helped them do the online. So I don't know if maybe we need to have a couple of situations where people can learn how to use online.
Okay. I'll take that feedback to Casey and her team.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Bosak?
Cliff, is the special event number on the P&L pure enough to be consistent with merchandise sales and food and beverage sales? Do you net it the same way, or is there other stuff in there
Yes.
that would create a difference?
Yes, so we reflect it as a gross profit, yes.
So maybe it would be helpful on the P&L under special events to show net like you do with merchandise and food
I
and
can do
beverage.
that,
So all three are treated the same.
yes.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no other questions, there's no vote that's required here. So these minutes will be sent to the governing board for filing. So thank you very much. Cliff, you did a good job. And we had no questions online.
No questions online.
Thank you. The second issue is one that we want to remain very focused on today. And it's our capital projects, both new and then the repair and replacing. So in January, on January the 16th, the governing or the Budget and Finance Committee actually submitted a recommendation to the governing board. I'm going to read that recommendation to you. The governing board create and provide to the standing committees a ranked list of key priorities for new capital investments and to provide that by the end of February. Didn't happen. This recommendation was submitted on January the 16th, but it never made it to the governing board. The parliamentarian now tells us that if we want this, we have to resubmit. Well, our deadline is within a week. to do this. So given the time sensitivity and all that's transpired in the past few weeks, it's pointless to challenge why it was not moved forward. The governing board president prepared a 2-page explanation as how we as a committee must proceed. There is one sentence in the memo that I think that I would like to quote. If the governing board approves a new capital item for the general manager's budget, that sets it as a priority for the next fiscal year. In retrospect, right or wrong, we're facing a deadline and we must move forward for our capital projects recommendations to the governing board. And today is the day that we have been, we've seen the capital projects on multiple occasions. Carl has presented them to us. Carl is here today, should we need his expertise. But I want to proceed to that component of our responsibility, and that's to look at all of the capital projects, both new and the replacement and repair. Thank you. Got the R&Rs mixed up. So there's 2 categories. One is 50,000 to 999,000, or excuse me, 50,000 to 99,900. Okay, and then the other was 100,000 plus. Now, I want to go through to give some context to how our other clubs have done this. Yep. I'm sorry, our other committees. Yep, that's exactly what I meant. The other committees, Charter Clubs Committee, they had 1 pullout, and that was for the Kuntz court renovations for $50,000. The Properties Committee had 4 pullouts, Lizard Acres Pub for $225,000, library expansion for $100,000, softball outfield fence for $495,000, the Kuntz court renovations. But they also had a recommendation to add $10,000 to a project, to an existing project for the gate, or excuse me, for the fencing around Beardsley, to add $10,000 to that. Now that's just informational for you, because all that is just something they had done, and I wanted to mention that in passing. Sports Pavilion had no pullouts, and the Golf Committee had no pullouts. Okay, so our job today, take this for what it's worth, because this is their submission to the governing board. We in Budget and Finance Committee are responsible for going through these categories, and I'll start them. We'll start with the $100,000 plus, simply because that's the top of the list, and that's the shortest list that we have. Okay, so what we want to do here today is to get some level of consensus from our committee here on how we want to proceed with this. So if we reach consensus that we want to pull it out, that will be, and the committee reaches that consensus, we'll pull it out. But otherwise, it will be moved forward for, and the governing board will have to make the final the final approval or disapproval on it. In the new categories, and for new capital, there are only 2 items that exceed $100,000. And I'm going to read them both, and then we can either vote yea or nay on that, or we can have some kind of a level of discussion. The first one is the Sports Pavilion, Lizard Acres. It's a $225,000 renovation, and the proposed cost is still $225,000. The second one is the projected library expansion, architectural drawings and documents, and that's for $100,000. Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
Before we begin, I just want to announce a potential conflict of interest. This conflict of interest is due to the fact that I'm a member of the governing board of directors. This conflict of interest has been filed with the state of Arizona. One of the things that I do for enjoyment is that now that I'm retired, I am a musician. As a musician and an entertainer, I do have the opportunity to potentially perform at various venues in Sun City West, including Lizard Acres. So I just wanted to announce that there's a potential conflict of interest. That's in accordance with state law. I don't believe that there is one. If you knew how much money was involved, you'd know that there probably isn't either. Nonetheless, all joking aside, even for a single penny, it's a potential conflict of interest. So I needed to announce that in accordance with state law before we begin.
So just one step farther from that, that does not preclude Director Novello from voting. She has announced her possible conflict. So. Director Novello?
I would like to pull out the library expansion at this point. Again, a lot of these things are small numbers, and it doesn't mean that I'm opposed to the whole concept, but this is not the time or the year to really consider that. I think we have to be more conservative. I don't see it as a key priority for our, in the absence of any priorities, in the 3 to 5 year time frame from our governing board. I don't see it as a priority going forward at this time, so I propose we pull that out of the budget for the next fiscal year.
Thank you. Lizard Acres, the next one is Lizard Acres, $225,000. Any comments on that? Mr. Miller?
Chairman Rhodes, I do have a comment.
Okay. Ms. Kellis,
Yes.
you have the floor.
I do have some questions regarding Lizard Acres. I understand that there is a problem with the sound where the bands are facing towards the glass windows. Does this remodel of Lizard Acres include them being with their back against the window so it reflects the opposite way? Do we know that information?
Lynn, I don't know that we know that. I can tell you that the architects and the professional staff have gone there and they have done a configuration of the proposed renovations, and what they have proposed maximizes the speakers and all the layout of the floor. So, Director Novello.
So
Lynn, this is Christine speaking. If you go back through the Sports Pavilion committee meetings in our past capital meetings, we were given a schematic of what's proposed, not the final, but it's a renovation that as Dick was saying, it does maximize space. It will address some, but not all, or its proposal was that it would address some, but not all of the noise, but mostly just make it a more of a workable space. It was not originally conceived for entertainment, so it's just a larger bar, as I recall, and so forth. But all the schematics and everything are all on file with us in past presentations.
And I might add, that all of the committees, with the exception of properties committees, recommended that it not be taken out. Sports Pavilion was supportive of it.
thank you.
Okay, so do we have consensus? Oh, Mr. Miller?
I would like to take it out.
Okay, do we have any discussion on that? Mr. Bagnato?
Thank you, Dick. I concur with Dr. Miller, and particularly from my point of view, we've done enough to put this community at risk of a multi-million-dollar DWI lawsuit because someone had been overserved by a rec center employee on rec center premises. And so that alone, I wish the thing weren't even there unless it was being run by a private entity. But since it's not, I will not attach my name to any further expansion of this, simply because I will not put the residents and this community at risk of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Okay, do we have any consensus on this? Mr. Bosak?
Excuse me, I thought Cliff gave a fairly reasonable explanation of payback the last meeting. Not as quick as we'd like, I guess. Hadn't considered the kind of points that Frank brought up. Don't spend a lot of time there. Have no dog in the fight as far as I'm concerned.
So how would you, what position would you take? To pull it out or leave it in?
No, I would leave it in.
Leave it in. Okay. Mr. Miller, you want it taken out?
I do want it taken out. I agree with Frank. Also, again, the payback on this at $8,000 a year, I mean, it is an extremely long payback. I don't have a dog in the fight either. The only time I've been in Lizard Acres is when I went to the torch class that was there. But I just don't see the utility of spending that kind of money for that kind of payback, in addition to the potential liability issues.
Thank you.
So I want it taken out.
Mr. Davis?
I agree, it should be taken out.
Director Novello?
I believe, again, as I recall, this was proposed not as a payback or a profitability investment for the community, but rather an expansion of an amenity. It's enjoyed by many. I do hear and acknowledge all the concerns about liability. We have it even to a much smaller extent, I hope, at our golf courses, right, where we do serve some of the same beer and so forth. Nonetheless, I recognize the concerns. I would support by consensus that the governing board pull this out for further review. I just wanted to point out that this was not conceived as a payback, but rather an expansion of an amenity. Thanks.
Mr. Parsons?
I will vote to leave it in.
Mr. Bagnato?
Out.
Thank you. Ms. Kellis?
Out.
But by consensus, we're going to recommend pulling the $225,000. Yes, sir.
A lot of people do use this facility, and it's been a real plus to that whole pavilion activity. I think we owe it to somebody to do some work that specifies what would happen, what would have to happen, to put it back on the docket in the future in maybe a different way, different format, different design. What would have to happen to overcome the objections to it so that it could be upgraded and become a more representative facility of Sun City West.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're going to have to deal with at a later date. I appreciate that. If indeed, because this is the recommendation to the governing board. Okay, thank you very much. The next, we have 7 items over $100,000 in our R&R. I will read them so you will have an idea. The first one is for $495,000. That's a softball outfield replacement fence. The second one is the Silvercraft remodeling, $375,000. Pool deck outdoor replacement for Palm Ridge, $186,000. Activities and aquatics roofs to restore on Palm Ridge, $160,000. cardio equipment for the rec centers, and it goes, they rotate that, is $159,000. A flat roof restore on the admin building for $140,000. NEC phone system, $130,000. A pool deck indoor replacement at Palm Ridge, $71,000. No, excuse me, that one doesn't count. We stopped. Okay. So the last one is the NEC replacement. Do we have any discussion on any of the items in there? Mr. Bagnato.
Thank you, Dick. As far as the softball field, I've seen comments that all that was really necessary was to repair 2 poles, and that was done for a cost of about $100. I'm not necessarily against spending the money, but I do have a question, and Carl is here in the audience. He may be able to answer. I've got to believe that high-quality netting, such as what you would see on a golf driving range, is more than adequate to stop a softball if it can certainly stop a golf ball. And I wonder have we looked at netting instead of chain link? Would there be some cost savings there, taking into account that netting probably doesn't have anywhere near the life expectancy of chain link? And so I'm looking at perhaps there might be a less expensive way of solving a problem that may not even exist because of the information we've gotten that it's only been a repair of 2 posts. So, Carl, could you help us out here?
Very good
Mr.
question,
Wilhelm?
Mr. Magnato. I appreciate that. The proposal stands for a $495,000 request. However, the general manager has asked that in the process of further development of this, that we look at a couple other options that we are going to actually physically witness at some of the ball fields in the communities around us, such as Peoria and Surprise. There is an opportunity for a possibility of a little shorter chain link fence, and then a taller netting, as Mr. Bagnato mentioned. So I am interested in investigating that. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot with a project that comes up short. So I will be doing all my due diligence to come up with a solution for an approved project at the best cost.
So Carl, are you telling us there is a possibility of another option besides the one that's on the table right now?
I'm going to continue investigating and see what a little less chain link fence and a little bit more.
And when you say continuing investigating, and I'm not trying to put you in a corner here, what kind of a time frame are we looking at?
Nothing that's going to affect the, nothing that's going to help make you make your decision on this budget item.
Okay, thank you.
While Carl's here, save you some steps. I noticed, and please correct me if I'm wrong, lots of meetings, lots of discussions about the softball fence. The Properties Committee recommended removing that item just for this year and deferring it, as I recall, and deferring it by a year, as I recall. Am I remembering that?
You're remembering that correct, yes.
So it's not that it's not that the property, because that's what I recall as well. It's not so much that it's if, but when we have to do some of these structural repairs. We were out and we saw that, right? So this is not, it's not something that we can just throw another $100 at and get another 10 years, because you guys have done that for us, for you and your staff, I should say, have been doing this for a while, doing the best to keep everything safe for all of us and so forth. But if we deferred, I believe the recommendation was deferral. Am I correct?
Yes, until the future date when the AstroTurf was planned for replacement.
And I think that's probably another year or two. I can't remember.
2 to 3.
2 to 3. So it would be combining those together. And we did discuss that during the tour you gave to Budget and Finance.
And that would create an efficiency.
Yeah. Thank you. In light of that, thank you for answering and reaffirming my memory. In light of that, I too would support looking at the timing of this. There's a possibility of deferring the project, not canceling it entirely, but if we defer that, we may get some efficiency by combining a few. But I think we all have to acknowledge, and we're all finance people here, we all have to acknowledge that, inflation So don't know if the costs are going to go down on a net basis, but still it's worth taking a look at. So recommending that to the governing board under that. Yes.
And just as a reminder, this is a line item in the repair and replacement line items, so our reserve study. This isn't a project that goes away, so it's an asset that we're tracking. And so it wouldn't be canceled, it would just be
A
deferred.
deferral. If the Properties Committee is recommending deferral, then they may be closer to it than we are. I want to see it happen personally, but as long as it's being done with that consideration, I would support it, the deferral or removal.
Okay, so Frank, your recommendation is to pull it, or your consensus to pull it?
My recommendation is to pull it and defer it until we have more information.
Mr. Parsons?
I would agree to defer it.
Director Novello, I believe you want to...
I would support deferring it, yes.
Okay. Mr. Davis?
Defer.
Dr. Miller?
Defer.
Mr. Bosak?
Agree to defer.
That will be pulled. Thank you.
Hello. This is Lynn.
Yeah, Christine, put your name I'm sorry, how do you feel on this? This is on the softball. This is on the $495,000 repair for the softball fence.
Yes, I believe it should be deferred.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any of the other questions on the remaining items in our R&R? Silvercraft, pool deck, aquatic roofs, cardio equipment, another roof repair. Mr. Bagnato?
I'm concerned particularly about Silvercraft because when you add in the flooring and the ceiling tiles, we're looking at a project, $435,000 estimated amount. I asked a question recently at another meeting about how many people actively use the facility at any given time, and someone stepped up to the microphone, and I believe the answer was in the prior month, 152 separate residents had checked in. That means we're looking at an expenditure of close to $3,000 per club member. I believe that that's an outrageous sum of money considering that the club itself doesn't contribute a dime. We can call this a renovation, but when you're talking about spending that kind of money, you could build a pretty nice house for that kind of money. And I question, could this project be done at a much lower rate? So my move right now is that we pull that project.
Okay, I just want to remind the committee that we did tour that. Many of the committee members did go over and tour that. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Bagnato. Does anyone else have any comments regarding that? Okay, Director Novello?
Oh. Is this any better? Okay, great. My concern here is that it is a big amount of money. When we toured this facility, it had not been upgraded nor touched, all of these items for I believe at least 25, if not 30 years. So I understand that it's a big. I know. Here we go. It keeps cutting in and out, but so this one I actually support keeping in. I know it's a big dollar item, and it's not so much a payoff for a particular club. Some would prefer that I remain off mic, but just so I would encourage us to look at this. These are facilities that we build for everybody. I understand that right now it is in use by one particular club, and I do acknowledge Mr. Bagnato's points about the membership, et cetera. but it's a beautiful amenity. It's on our main campus. And again, it attracts a lot of visitors, and a lot of, as well as our own residents, enjoy looking at the products of all of our clubs, right? They're all on display as we go forward. So I support keeping it in. This repair, replace has been deferred for a bit, and by bundling everything together, it looks like a big dollar item, but it's actually going to be more efficient for the entire community as well as for the club to do everything at one point. So looks like a big dollar item, but I appreciate the fact that it was all put together in one package so that we could evaluate.
Thank you. So far, we have a pro and a con on this. So I would like to poll the committee members. Mr. Bosak?
Leave it in.
Dr. Miller?
Yeah, before I cast my vote, I want to make a comment. I think people need to remember that our facilities are now, in some cases, approaching 40-plus years of age. The longer you put things off to fix those things, the more they end up costing. We just had the discussion about the softball fence and the inflation. I mean, the reality is our club spaces, whether they're for the Silver Club or anybody else, is one of those amenities that Rec Center provides. And the longer you wait to fix stuff as they break, the harder it gets. So having said that, I don't think this is going to be the only time we're going to see a big request from a club to go in and fix a space. In fact, I think those will start to accelerate because of the age of the facilities. So that's just going to become a fact of life for us in the next 10 years. So having said all that, I support leaving it in.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Davis?
I support leaving it in.
Director Novello?
Exactly as you said, as Dr. Miller said, I support leaving it in at this time.
Mr. Parsons?
Leave it in.
And Mr. Bagnato? Mr. Bagnato?
I'm not against the renovation. I'm against spending $437,000 to do it.
Do we leave it in, or is your in? Out. Okay, thank you. Ms. Callis?
Leave it in.
Thank you. By consensus, we will leave that in. Do we have any other comments for any of the other items that are on the R&R $100,000 plus list? Pool deck, activities, aquatics, roofs, cardiovascular. Oh, okay. Mr. Donato.
Looks like Katie may have left the room. The $130,000 for the phone system, can someone refresh my memory, perhaps Cliff, how long it will take us to recoup that investment?
Cliff, do you have that answer?
Yeah, the ROI that I was given was a savings in our operating expense account of $7,000 per month. About 20 months.
That's actually, as I recall it as well, there was a significant payback on that. Okay. Okay, so hearing no other objections, I would like to take a final consensus on the remainder in toto of the 100,000 R&R. Mr. Bosak?
Agree.
Mr. Miller?
Leave in.
Mr. Davis?
Remain, leave them in.
Director Novello?
Remain, yes.
Leave
Mr. Parsons?
leave the rest in.
Okay, Mr. Bagnato?
Agreed, leave the rest in.
Thank you.
Yes, leave the rest in.
Thanks, Lynn. We still have golf that we want to, there are 5 items in golf that are over $100,000. I'm going to read them. Irrigation system replacement, $5,550,000. Golf maintenance equipment, 19 pieces, $992,000. Golf maintenance vehicle, 12 vehicles at $357,000. Parking lot, mill and replace in the pro shop, $135,000. And golf carts for courses, 20 of them for $229,000. Does anyone have any comments on any of these? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to ask for a consensus. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Bignato.
Definitely yes on all of the items.
Okay, Mr. Parsons,
Leave all of them in.
Director Novello,
Yes on all?
Mr. Davis,
Yes on all.
Dr. Miller,
Yes on all.
Mr. Bosack,
Yes on all.
Lynn Kellis,
Yes on all.
thank you. You have completed that particular task, and that will go into the minutes. We've done half of our job for capital pullout. We have the 50,000 to 99,900 left. There are 3 items in new capital. There are 7 items in.
Are we going to discuss the items in allowances? Or will
Oh,
we do that in
allowances?
total? Do that at the end? I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
yeah. We have 3 items in the new capital. We have 7 items, no, excuse me, 6 items in R&R. And we have 5 items, we have no items in golf. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. In the new capital, there are, there's 2 items. The first is the Beardsley iron fence with the gates. It's for $57,000. And the second one is actually there's 3 items, excuse me. Yeah, the second one is a tractor with a backhoe for $55,000. And the third one is tennis renovation, the tennis, it's a Kuntz renovation. The $50,000 is for drawings and plans for the renovation of that tennis, pickleball, racket, whatever facility that we have in Kuntz. So, and I will, just to refresh everyone's memory, Charter Clubs Committee recommended to pull it out. Property Committee recommended to pull the $50,000 amount for the Kuntz renovation, the Kuntz tennis facility. Properties recommended that the Kuntz renovation for $50,000 be removed. It's just the 2. The other sports, the Sports Pavilion Committee and Golf Committee did not recommend to pull it. Okay, so let's have the discussion on any one of those 3 items. Mr. Bosack, would you like to start?
I would like to take it out just so we quit talking about it. The tennis facility.
Pull it out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, concerning the tennis facility, I just want to clarify 2 things. One, I believe it's not a conversion from tennis to pickleball anymore. I think we discussed that and agreed to that a while back, that we wouldn't consider pickleball there anymore. And then also, I thought one of the driving reasons for actually getting this project going was because Carl mentioned that it's in a possibly an unsafe condition, and something should be done about that now and not later.
Carl?
50% of the facility is currently locked for unsafe conditions. The other 50%, which is 3 courts, remain open and are fine condition.
So let me just make a couple comments about this. This has been a very contentious issue from the day that we saw it. And there have been several plans on what would happen and what may happen to it. We recently heard an idea that it would be turned into tennis facilities and there would be a corresponding number of courts over at tennis that we converted to pickleball, and I don't think any of that stuff has been nailed down. I think that is purely hypothetical. This $50,000, as I understand it, regardless of what we make from it right now, is to give our engineering staff enough information from a specs and a costing perspective to know how much money it's going to cost if it is converted to pickleball, if it's converted to tennis, to whatever. This is really kind of a jumping off point. So it's $50,000 for investigation and specs.
And the only thing I'd like to add to that is, regardless of the recommendations or the final positive or negative approval from the governing board, the Kuntz Tennis Facility resides in our reserve study tool as an asset, and funds are saved for those asset replacements for a future date of whatever is determined, regardless of the request of these $50,000 to plan for something greater, something different, or just a base remodel of that facility. So regardless, the future does hold funds for renovation of that facility.
Well, I think the issue that we're struggling with is uncertainty. So, Cliff?
Yeah, and I believe the funds that are in the reserve study are roughly 600,000 for that facility.
I think that's close.
Yeah. So
Director Novello?
just so everybody has all the details on that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the clarity. This is such a challenge because if any of you have had the opportunity, as we've had, to go and tour the facility, it's not only in, there are parts of it that are in disrepair. It is, in my opinion, the only place I know in Sun City West that we own that is seriously an eyesore. And it's not through anybody's fault. We haven't decided what to do with this space, and we really do need to make some kind of an investment to restore this facility that we own to something that we're proud of. It's the only eyesore, or whatever, it's the only area that really looks like it's in disrepair that I'm aware of. That's our, if you will, collective ownership. The concern, though, that I have is that the definition seems still ambiguous to me. I know I believe personally, can't say I know, I believe personally that with all the investigations and all the presentations that you've made to us, Carl, and the whole team, that the intentions may be good. However, the definition is really ambiguous at this point. So I recommend we pull this out for governing board discussion to ensure that the $50,000 really is defined to be spent for the purposes we imagine, which is determine how to renovate this, or whatever it is that the governing board decides is in the community's best interests. But as defined, it's a conversion to post-tension slab. So I don't know exactly how to redefine this, but I would pull it for further review. That's my recommendation.
Mr. Bosak?
Carl, would it be an accurate statement to say that nothing should be spent on this facility until this pickleball, tennis plan for whatever is going to happen in the future has some sort of resolution that you can bring to us, that all the committees that are involved, or am I being presumptuous?
I'm not going to comment to that. All along as I do capital investigations, I stay neutral. So the requests have come from both our general manager as an idea, from our community. We've also heard our community say, no, we don't want pickleball there. So we have a facility that's worthy of being brought back to good condition, or a discussion that says, what else should we do? So I'm going to defer that question.
Dr. Miller?
You know, I made the somewhat flip suggestion at one point in time in the recent past that we ought to just fill the hole in the ground in with dirt. And Carl said, nope, that's too expensive. And I was only semi-facetious when I made that comment. You know, Sun City West has a lack of space for new facilities, new buildings, okay? That provides, the Kuntz facility provides a footprint space And I started thinking about this in the context of the suggestion that the library really wanted to be a social space as one of its functions. And part of the new planning was to build meeting rooms. So I started thinking, well, okay, fill the hole in, provides a spot that you could build a new building if we chose to do that, and set it up as a meeting center. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunities here to think outside the box. And really it comes back, and I don't play tennis and I don't play pickleball because I have bad knees. Okay, and so the real question is what's the need from the pickleball community? What's the need from the tennis community? What does the long-range plan for the community really say we need to go do? So until we understand that, I don't think we should spend $50,000 to go do this. So,
Mr. Magnato?
Thank you, Dick. I'm kind of with Gary on this one. The sooner we get rid of this thing, the sooner we can have our meeting shortened by about 20 minutes. I've yet to hear anybody come up to this microphone from the community and say, build it, we promise we will come. Most everybody, beginning with perhaps the most important group, which is pickleball, don't want this being done the way it's planned. And so I think we need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a concept that the community can wrap their arms around. As far as this thing being an eyesore, it's only an eyesore if you go down there and look at it. Nobody driving by even knows where this facility is. So let's go back to the drawing board. Let's pull this out. And when we see a better plan coming forward that the community can get behind, then we should move forward, but not now.
Okay, let's go ahead and pull it. Ms. Kellis, we're going to ask you first to begin. Do you want to pull this $50,000 or do you want to leave it in? And this is for the Kuntz conversion.
Pull it.
Okay. Mr. Bagnato?
Out.
Mr. Parsons?
Pull it out.
Director Novello?
Pull it out.
Mr. Davis?
Pull it out.
Dr. Miller?
out.
Mr. Bosak?
Please pull it out.
Let the record show.
Mr. Chairman, I may be out of order, but is it possible that we recommend to the governing board that some money be put aside to study and to determine what's the right use for this space, so that we're ready for, we don't have this discussion again for another 10 months next year, because it will come up again next year.
Yeah,
And we'll
that's-
spend the same 10 months talking about this again. We need the study to determine what's the best use.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how we could handle that. Carl, can you have comment?
That is the purpose of one of the determinations of allowances. Unexpected facility improvements. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we have two other items that are on the $50,000 plus category. Tractor with a backhoe and the iron fence at Beardsley. Does anyone have any problems with either of those? Mr. Bagnato?
The Beardsley Park fence, I believe, is a need and not a want, so I absolutely support that. As far as the tractor with the backhoe, I've been against this from the beginning. I get conflicting information about how many times they've actually needed to have a backhoe during the course of a year, but either way, it's not a lot of time. There's also a top-notch Kubota backhoe that's assigned to environmental services, or I see it parked at the golf courses and being used. It's quite easy to just go ahead and get the backhoe attachment, and when it's needed, just drop it onto the back of that tractor, and away we go. Now we've got a very capable piece of equipment already on the premises. So I believe that we need to take that out. There's another way of solving this problem of environmental services and facilities maintenance needing a backhoe. I believe that they can certainly decide who needs it more important on any given day. So I'd like to see that come out.
Any other comments? Well, we're going to try to reach consensus on the remaining two, which is the Beardsley fence and the backhoe, the tractor with the backhoe. And the only comments that we've had so far are on the tractor with the backhoe. Director Novello?
I agree with Frank on the tractor and backhoe. I would like to pull that out.
Let's take a consensus. Mr. Bosack, yes, a vote on both the Coons fence and the tractor and backhoe.
Fence, absolutely. Carl, can you, for probably the third or fourth time, shed some light on the need for this? I'm conflicted only because I know Russ feels very strongly about this, and he's not one to spend money unnecessarily, so
Russ feels strongly about this because it's an operational efficiency in helping how we operate and deal with emergencies. Russ has also made it very clear that if your decision is no, then it's no. So, and that's all I have to say.
thank you.
Gary, what's your position on the Beardsley fence and the backhoe?
Well, Frank's suggestion intrigues me. I've never run a backhoe, but I've seen people do it, and I've seen pieces of equipment attached to tractors and taken off lots of times. I worked sewer construction going to college. That was a fun job. And this was a really important piece of equipment, and we needed it when we needed it. So I'd say leave it in, just based on the conversation we've had previously.
In the Beardsley fence? Okay, Dr. Miller?
Leave them both in.
Mr. Davis?
Leave them both in.
Director Novello?
Leave in the fence and remove the backhoe is my vote.
Mr. Parsons?
Leave both in.
Mr. Bignato?
The fence stays, the backhoe out.
Ms. Kellis?
Leave them both in.
Okay, so they're both staying in. The Beardsley fence was unanimous, and the backhoe was 2 out, and the balance were in, so they will stay in. Okay. Yep. Okay, Frank, Mr. Bernardo.
Yes. Dick, can I comment on the pickleball monitor station? I realize it's only $30,000, but I don't think that tells the whole story.
Well, that's not part of our scope of review right now, Frank. You know, we want to stick to the $50,000 to $99,000 range. Okay.
When will we discuss those, Director Rhodes?
Well, that's under the purview of the general manager. They have a $50,000 authority.
Doesn't the governing board approve all of the budget? So the governing board would recommend
That's not part
pulling?
of our, you know. Cliff, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes and yes. So the governing board does approve the capital budget in total. I think what Mr. Rhodes is saying is that today is only to discuss pullouts for 50 and 100. So
What's the time frame by which you and the governing board require a recommendation on items below 50,000?
Let me address this part. We are going to be addressing the proposed budget. Hopefully, we're going to have time today to do that, and that will be the primary agenda item of our Budget and Finance Committee meetings for the balance of the year. So I'm sure there will be opportunity in one of those sessions where we can call that out.
These are capital items, Dick, not operational, so that's my confusion.
Well, that's not part of what we're trying to do today.
I understand, as long as my concern is noted that we should still be able to recommend all items on the capital budget. At some point, the governing board will recommend all or not, some. So I understand our scope for today.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Magnato?
Yeah, Dick, the reason I bring it up is because it's not just the $30,000 to build a shack that's the size of a refrigerator box. It's the $60,000 to $65,000 a year cost to put a monitor in that box.
It's untrue, Frank.
It just...
These are existing monitors, Frank. We discussed this at the last meeting.
Okay.
Carl, did you have something?
I
Carl,
just was going to help the committee. So the project planning process, as I mentioned, as we go along through this 7 and 8 month process, for the benefit of making these decisions earlier instead of having this now, we kind of draw the line and say from 0 to 50,000, we agreed that we've moved on and talked and debated all these things. So that's just in the benefit of helping the process go along. Then we have a 50 to 100, and then we have a 100 to later. And that's, but it's always a governing board opportunity to pull out an item for $10,000.
Thank you. So I'll bring my concerns up. I have the opportunity to do that at the governing board. Not all our committee members do. So I was just noting that I don't know when that discussion and debate occurred. It didn't occur at any meetings that I've been at nor heard this year.
Well, our committee members will have the opportunity to discuss other financial issues, to bring them up, because as I had said earlier, the proposed 24-25 budget is going to be a primary agenda item for the remainder of the year for Budget and Finance Committee. So there should be ample time, and including that was planned for today, although the hour is starting to wane, but we'll get there to when we can. So.
As long as we are not, we've missed a few deadlines in the past, with all due respect, to bring up new capital and so forth. We've missed a few, and so we've lost an entire year on making suggestions. As long as we've not, as a committee, missed the opportunity to discuss and debate the items under 50,000, then I'm fine. These are capital items, not operational. As long as we can still come back to those if we have concerns, I'm fine. Thank you, sir.
There were deadlines for the other committees. The committee deadline for Budget and Finance is April the 2nd. Today is the day that we're trying to nail down the budget or the capital items. We do have till April the 2nd to do that, although that is not what we prefer to do. But we've been looking at this for the past 3 months and haven't been able to come to closure, but we have today.
Right. We have not discussed the items under 50,000.
No, we haven't, and that's not part of our agenda. Okay. Okay, we have let's go ahead and get a final conclusion. Oh, we did on the, we did, okay. So we have the 100,000 plus, and we have completed the assignment for the $50,000 to $99,000. So that part is completed. I congratulate the committee because that has been a very difficult task to do. So thank you very much. Do we have any comments from the? We have.
Other.
Okay.
Sorry. We have other areas.
We have one other area.
Blue and green.
None of these are over in the category that we need to deal with.
I'm sorry, Dick, I see there are a number of items in blue that are above
Oh,
50.
okay. Yep, you're right.
That's all.
You're absolutely right.
And
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Get my bearings. Okay, in the 50,000, thank you, I missed this entire section, okay. So $50,000 to $99,000, there are 6 items in there. I'll read them off and then we can discuss them. Pool deck indoor for Palm Ridge, that's at $71,000. Strength equipment and bench accessories for Palm Ridge, $63,954. Landscaping vehicles, I'm sorry? Which one are you talking about?
he wasn't even there yet, so.
That was my next one.
That was the next one.
That was the next one. Landscaping vehicles for $56,903. Fitness, it's the flat roof restore on R.H. Johnson for $54,000, $54,781. A replacement truck, pickup truck for admin general use, $54,573. HVAC, 5 units, Kuntz, $51,584. Do we have any comments on any one of those 6 items? Okay, so then we will try to reach consensus in mass for that. So do you want me to read these again, or do you think we can go ahead and take a consensus on this? Okay, Mr. Bosak, I'll start with you.
Approve all of them.
Okay. Dr. Miller?
Approve all of them.
Mr. Davis?
Approve all of them.
Christine?
We're not approving.
You're recommending?
We are recommending, and I recommend we move all forward.
I recommend we leave all of them in.
Yes to all of them.
Ms. Kellis?
Yes to all of them.
Thank you. Now we have completed.
How about allowances? Mr. Chair, I do apologize. I know I'm being a stick here, but we have a job to do and we're almost there.
I understand that. There are 3 items on allowances. One of them is over $100,000. 2 of them are between $50,000 and $99,900. The first one over $100,000 is for $115,000. It's a well pump replacement. Does anyone have comments on that?
Just a reminder, this is just in case. It's not
right.
anything that's planned to be spent. We just needed to have it available if we need it, and believe me, we need it when they go out.
This is all contingency.
We own the water system completely, and it's our responsibility to maintain it. It's really essential.
Carl?
These are suggested categories. We do our best to define the best dollar value based on history. Otherwise, this is a $420,000 one line item allowance.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
My only comment on the entire category is the fact that some of these are, they've caused us some heartache over this year. I would simply encourage the governing board to look at the entire amount of $420,000 and ensure that it's satisfactory, that it is being managed in a way that's transparent to them and to the entire community. No concerns about the well pumps. We've spent more than that, so I would endorse us keep that for sure.
Consensus on that? Mr. Bosak?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Director Novello?
Yes.
Dwayne Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Bugnato?
Yes.
Ms. Kellis?
Yes.
Thank you. Two items that are between $50,000 and $99,000. Safety and structural integrity and unexpected facility improvements. This is really hard to try to, I mean, this is all what-if contingency.
Understood, but the library expansion was pulled out of safety and structural integrity this past year.
Okay.
So I just, that's the reason why I'm saying, we just want to make sure that there's enough in these various categories, or, that we have transparency to the spending. As it stands, when we need a safety or a structural improvement or an unexpected facility improvement, as Carl was pointing out, such as something like we were saying, gee, we need to figure out what to do with Coons, that would come from there, and that's general manager purview. So we need to have some money put aside for these sorts of contingencies.
And that's what the 400,000 is for. I guess the guess would be, is 400,000 enough? Maybe we should go to 600,000.
That's a good discussion. My big concern has and continues to be information technology. We don't have enough money in this overall budget. I know we're not allowed to talk about all the small items, but if you look at the small item for IT and the small item, one small tiny item that's being put on the reserve study, and that's great move, by the way, for IT, that's in our under 50,000 category. I'm just concerned that we don't have enough money there to study what we need. We don't have an IT roadmap. I'd like to see us actually spend more. I know that that's an unpopular opinion in terms of spending more money in general, but that's my only concern. So I wouldn't propose taking it out. I just don't know why it's a contingency and we're spending it only if we feel like we need. And it doesn't require comment or anything. I'm just saying that's my only concern. I think there might be a little too little in the overall budget for IT.
Mr. Bosak?
Just a reminder that Carl provides us with every dollar that's spent out of this category as a line item, and everything that comes out of here is identified, totally transparent, and no reason to question what's being spent unnecessarily. I mean, these are all needed expenses, and you've done a great job managing it.
Mr. Wilhelm?
I'd just like to add a little bit of history. So I've been a part in this allowance category along with other departments and accounting team and general manager for 7 years. And up to about 3 years ago, there was no definition of these defined categories. It was just an allowance. So then the questions were posed then. We didn't have any defined categories. So this is, the defined categories are a help and an assumption to just clarify what the community might experience if we have an emergency or an unknown event that needs to be solved. So again, they don't 100% define the dollars that are in there. So if, for example, I had no safety and structural integrity needs for the year, but all of a sudden IT had an emergency that was much more expensive than the perceived 30,000, then it would come in front of the board for a decision based if it wasn't within the general manager signing allowance. So.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and cut to the chase here. Does anyone have any objection for the one item that's over 100,000 and the two items that are between $50,000 and $99,000? Okay, Mr. Bosak?
No.
Miller?
No.
Mr. Davis?
No.
Ms. Novello?
My concerns are below 50, so no.
Mr.
No.
Parsons?
No.
Ms.
No.
Kellis?
No concerns.
Thank you very much. Okay. All righty. All right, I'm just going to make an editorial comment here. It is 10:39, and we have two relatively significant agenda items to work on. and we have every intention to do that. I'm willing to take a 5-minute bio break right now, because my guess is that we're going to be here a little bit still. So unless anyone objects, we're going to take a bio break. It's 10:39. I'd like to have everybody back here by 10:45. 1 minute. Reconvene the meeting. We're reconvening the meeting at 10:48. We have 2 agenda items remaining. Before we proceed to our next agenda item, we need to make we need to complete the official recommendation to the governing board. Okay, I'm going to do that right now, and then we're going to ask for a consensus vote from the committee. And the recommendation is that the Budget and Finance Committee has reached consensus to recommend that the governing board approve the proposed 24-25 capital project requests as laid out by Facilities and Capital Projects Manager Carl Wilhelm, with the exception of the library expansion and renovation design for $100,000. The Lizard Acres Sports Pavilion renovation for $225,000. The softball outfield fence repair at $495,000. And the tennis facility renovation and court conversion to post-tension design and architectural drawings for $50,000. Okay. Do we have a second? Okay, we'll poll. Mr. Bosak?
Agree.
Dr. Miller?
Agreed.
Mr. Davis?
Agreed.
Director Novello?
Agreed?
Mr. Parsons?
Agree.
Mr. Bignato?
Agreed.
Ms. Kellis?
Agreed.
The third item on our agenda this morning is a presentation by Cliff Swan on contingency strategy for the Arizona Minimum Wage Initiative. Mr. Swan?
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Okay, so no changes in the budget at this point, although there will be some changes presented as we move forward in terms of things that have come up, recommendations that have come through committees, golf and sports pavilion, things like that. So no big budget movers, but we'll present those at future meetings. But as of right now, no changes within the budget. So within my budget presentation, we talked about $18 an hour. Just to do a quick refresher on the budget and the proposal or what's out for an initiative now. First of all, just want to remind everybody, I had this slide in the presentation. When we look at increases, so the increases within this budget, these are the different types of employees that we have at the various 33 departments that we have here making up our 4 divisions. So these are the different type of positions we have in each of those departments and what percentage they make up of our overall payroll when it comes to headcount in those positions. So with that said, on the docket or out for signatures to be put on the ballot is a current initiative. There are 2. The first is this, and basically what this proposes is taking the Arizona minimum wage from the current $14.35 an hour to $18 an hour effective January 1, 2025. So that's what we're talking about today. This will be superseded by this initiative right here if this gets passed or if this gets enough signatures, which is to take the annual CPI increase, which we've budgeted $1 in this budget, and adding $1 to that for the next 2 years. So it kind of phases it in over time versus hitting it right away, January 1, 2025. Now, with the current, what that would do is, in this budget, is it would, in addition to the proposed increases, which is $1 an hour in minimum wage and 3% to cover all the other merit raise increase and other things that happen throughout the year in our payroll, 455 of our 489 employees would be impacted if January 1, the minimum wage became $18 per hour. So this would reach all the way through our hourly employees and also to impact 11 of our 41 salaried employees. So 455 of our 489 employees would be impacted by this in one form or another. So, and it would be impacted in addition to what's currently proposed in this budget. So the total impact in this budget would be roughly $825,000 additional payroll costs. So when we look at the timeline, of course, this presents a conundrum for us because we go through our budget process, we approve our budget in late May. We won't even find out if this gets on the ballot, if it has enough signatures, until July 3rd. Then it will be voted on November 7th. So we won't find out till late or early November if this gets passed, if it gets on the ballot. So I wanted to put this timeline together just to show everybody. July 3rd, the signatures from the initiative are due to the Secretary of State. They'll then look at the signatures. They need 256,000 signatures. That'll be validated, and if there are enough signatures, now they don't validate all 256. They have a process for validation. It's a sampling, but if they go through that process and the signatures are gotten and that is validated, we will find out in July that if it gets on the ballot. And if it gets on the ballot, in November of 2024. So if it gets then on the ballot and it gets passed, or a majority votes yes on it, then it will go into effect 18 an hour January 1, or the other superseded program, which would be whatever the proposed minimum wage increase would be January 1, it would add $1 to it. So with that said, we talked about how do we budget for this. That question is up there not to scare anybody, not to, it's just to initiate a conversation with this committee and engage with our community in this committee, so that we can talk this out and really help everybody understand what the impact of that would be and what would the measures we would take to help soften the blow of that. Because currently, as it currently stands, if that did happen, we have $1.1 million going to our reserve fund from operations. If we did nothing, $1.1 million would decrease to $275,000, all else being equal, and we would put $275,000 into our reserve fund, which would basically reduce our reserve fund balance from 26.6, would reduce it by $825,000 overall. That's what would happen, and it would drop our FFB down 2 points in this budget. So when we talk about this, the way we look at it operationally is what's the impact on the reserve fund, and if we came up with a strategy to keep the reserve fund at $26.6 million, what would we have to do, or what could we do to help mitigate this or have a contingency plan in place? So from operations, we came up with a scenario that we think would work and would have the least impact on the community in terms of the services that we provide, and have the biggest impact on our reserve fund balance. So first and foremost is new capital. New capital is new. It's not necessarily, I would say it's the needle shifts to want versus need. on new capital. So that and new capital, if you forego new capital, you get a dollar for dollar bang for your buck there in your reserve fund because it's not on the reserve study. If you forego a reserve study item, you're not changing your FFB percent. You have the money in the bank, but you still have the fully funded balance in the denominator. It doesn't change. Okay. However, if you forego new capital, that is a dollar for dollar impact in your reserve fund because it's not on the reserve study, and therefore it's a dollar for dollar impact. So every dollar you save is a dollar that goes back in the reserve fund at 100%. So with that said, our proposal would be that we go through the budgeting process. I currently have this down as approximately $600,000. If we saved approximately $600,000 by delaying our new capital projects until we know, so would get delayed until July 3rd. After July 3rd, if it didn't get on the ballot, we would know July whatever after the certification. If it had enough signatures, say it's July 10th, we would know by July 10th if we can move forward on our new capital projects, whatever gets approved. If it gets on the ballot, then we delay until November 7th, November 10th, call it. And if it gets passed, we forego new capital for the year. The FFB or the reserve fund impact of that would be 600 of the 800,000, approximately 600 of the 800,000. Another area where we could have a impact on the reserve fund is our allowances. So a lot of the items that we do on allowances, a large percentage are repair and replacement items. A lot of times when we do those, we align those to create efficiencies with other projects that are going on. So unexpected will do. It's also used for emergency purposes and other unplanned things. So what we would recommend is that of that $420,000, we would use those funds until we know for emergency purposes only. Okay? So we anticipate that we could have a savings of $125,000 if we did that, approximately at least $125,000. So there's $725,000 in funds of the $825,000. And then finally, there's some operating expense projects that we have on the budget this year that we can defer until we know. And if they don't take place this year, the world's not going to end, and we can forego those and put those in the following year budget if need be, after we've had an opportunity to assess the situation. So $100,000 in deferral in parking lot seal and stripes of $75,000 and $25,000 for cart paths. We can hold off on those. I will say, if we don't do the cart, if we don't do the cart paths by September, they're not going to get done anyway. Even if it gets on the ballot and it doesn't pass, we would kick those into the following year anyway, just because of timing. But the parking lot seal and stripes we could do in the spring if it went that far and the proposal didn't make the ballot, or it made the ballot and it didn't pass. So we could do those late in the spring next year with, it'll impact the community, but we could still get them done. So that total is $825,000. And if you take the current budget, returning an FFB percent of 47%, and on the column to the right, you'll see put the impact to the estimated reserve fund allocation of $825,000. That would drop the reserve fund to $25.8 million. And that would drop the FFB percent by 2% to 45%. And the right, you'll see what the contingency plan does, adds that 825 back in this budget, and creates a reserve fund balance back to the current proposed budget of 26.6 at a 47% FFB percent. So that would be the proposal from operations, and would love to hear your response to that and input on this.
Cliff, would you go through that last scenario again? You lost me on part of that.
On the, which part?
When you brought the spreadsheet.
Okay.
That one.
Okay, so the first column shows the current budget as it exists. The second column shows the impact to the budget of $825,000, a reduction. The third column shows the impact of all those different line items on the modeling. So basically, you're reducing the estimated reserve fund allocation down to $275,000 if it's impacting operations. Everything else being equal, APFs, capital spend, all of that, you can see that what the impact of those things would be. So with the contingency plan, we would increase the 275 from operations by 100,000, making that 375. We would forego 725,000 in new capital and R&R spend, which would drop the 1,047,000 in this current proposed budget, would drop that down to 322,000 from 1,047,000 in the capital spend, the new capital spend. You'll see I didn't touch R&R. And then what the impacts of those two adjustments would do in the overall modeling, and you'll see that the reserve fund balance stays at the 26.6 million, returning a 47% FFB percent. And it is our opinion that these items would have the least impact to the community because they're new capital items, and then the operating items that we're talking about, parking lots would just take another year to get sealed and striped, and the cart paths, again, we would have to, make some, if there's some potholes or things like that, patch those up and, just kind of at a very minimal cost. But we anticipate this would return the same reserve fund balance at the end of the year.
And this is a worst case scenario.
This is worst case, yes. If the other scenario passes, it's about 100,000 I anticipate impact, and we could weather that.
Director Novello?
Thank you, Director Rhodes, and I just wanted to thank you and your team for doing the analysis. And thanks for also explaining, hopefully everybody understands, what these really two scenarios that you've laid out for us. Quick one, I know that you had said this worst case scenario would be a roughly 2% impact to the fully funded balance. In the past, you've taught us all that that's compounded year over year, am I correct?
It is, yes.
So just to remind us all as owners and so forth, as we're listening to this, it's not just a one-time. Those impacts will continue if we chose that option. Yes. We'd have to adjust, I'm sure, in the future. But we have that one reduction to 45, but I believe that percent, but that would compound.
Yes. So it's not like the impact of dues, because dues do compound. And then we would have to, if we didn't address it the following year, if we didn't address $18 an hour and continued with the same dues, then compounded for sure.
But there's still some enduring impact of going
There
down
is.
to 45%.
Absolutely.
So thanks for that. Thank you for laying out the two options. I think it's definitely a worst case scenario associated here, but it's something that you've laid out an opportunity for us to minimize the impact to our fully funded balance.
Dr. Miller?
So Cliff, does this not presuppose that all those new capital projects are approved? We just took
I was prepared for that question.
Thank you. Because we just recommended that $375,000 of those not be approved.
And that 375 would already have a positive impact. So basically, so in the current proposed budget, those items are in there. If they're not in there, then it already increases the projected fully funded balance by 300 and change. So you need less of what I'm proposing to get there. Either way, you get there to the same amount, whether you forego those projects forever or $18 an hour happens and you forego them for the year. So it's the same impact.
Okay.
Yes, in the modeling.
Mr. Bosak?
Knowing that you're a very forward-thinking person, the next 825 after this one, does this become a blueprint for the future that you can replicate it, or is there a different approach that you have to take to come up with the same savings?
Different both, but yeah, you'd have to come up with a different, we'd have to take a look at our, we'd have to take a look at our two biggest levers that we pull and do it. Dues and golf rates, absolutely. And that's, and that's just, it is what it is. The other third is expenses. So looking at expenses, you determine at some point, do you decide to change what you do operationally? Do you decide to change what you provide to the community, which has an impact on service, has an impact on expense? That hasn't been proposed since I've been here, and I don't know that it ever has been, because when you do that, you really, what portion of the community are you disenfranchising? If you decide to do something in golf, are you disenfranchising the people who live on the golf course and the people who play golf? If you decide to close a rec center, are there certain clubs and things that have that space that you're disenfranchising? So anyway, all decisions can be put together, plans can be put together in the future, but things to consider.
And I don't have any doubt that when it comes to that, you're going to have multiple options available that you'd present, and we kind of pick the lesser of the evils, I suppose. Thank you.
Absolutely, we can draw up. Yep.
Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
Mr. Ragnano?
Thank you, Dick. Before we talk about the things that I have a question about, I think that, again, it's important that the community understands that this isn't something that's going to go through the legislature. This is something that we are going to be able to vote on, along with all the other things that we vote on next November. Again, this is being driven by an organization that has no ties whatsoever to the state of Arizona and is part of an initiative to raise the minimum wage at the federal level to $18 an hour. Cliff, I have a question. Terry, if we could go to slide 3.
I got it.
Okay, yeah, if we go to slide 3.
Sure.
And so on slide 3, the petition serial number is 1-01-2024, but then it's superseded, which, as far as I know, the meaning of the word superseded, that it's going to be replaced by 1-02. So the first one increases the minimum wage right off the bat to $18 an hour. The second one is going to raise the minimum wage by $1 over the cost of living increase, which we don't know what it's going to be yet for next year. So am I understanding we're going to be able to vote on both of these or just one of these?
So the way I understand it is that if both of these proposals get the required 256,000 signatures and are certified by the Secretary of State, this one would supersede $18 an hour, meaning it would replace it. However, if one got the required signatures and were certified by the Secretary of State, whichever one that was, and if it was only one, that one would get put on the ballot. So if they both were, this one would supersede it. If one of them did and it was this one, it would be on the ballot. If it was the other one, it would be on the ballot. That's the way I understand it.
Okay, I understand that then too. So while they're hoping to get the worst case scenario one through, they've always got a backup plan to get the other one through instead.
That's how it appears, yes.
Okay. I think that your plan to deal with this is pretty solid. Mathematically, the numbers make perfect sense to me. So, you did a good job. I think the residents are not going to be happy at all once they get a dues increase, which will be phenomenal, plus the normal ordinary dues increase. And so personally, I encourage every resident to vote against this when it does come up, if it comes up, and nothing would surprise me anymore. So is the rec center legally allowed to make statements trying to encourage the residents not to vote for this, or is it something that we have to legally stay clear of?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Cliff, could you give us, tell me again, what are the critical dates that we're looking at if this will go forward or not go forward?
So the critical dates are July 3rd is when the signatures are due to the Secretary, the Arizona Secretary of State. And if they get the proper number of votes, which is roughly 256,000, they'll go through a process of validating those signatures. And if they are validated, then it will get on the ballot to be voted on in November.
So we really won't know until November.
Hopefully we'll know July 3rd, but yes.
Really?
Hopefully July 10th we'll know,
Yeah.
and it won't get enough signatures, but yes, we may not know until
That
November
would be
8th.
Well, if we're July 3rd, it'd be,
It'd be killed. Be
we'd only
quashed.
have to hold our breath for 4 or 5 days.
Yes.
Director Novello?
Thank you. And so just to make sure that I understand this too, from a timing perspective, you laid this out great. We'll know at some point in July,
Yes.
right? Whether either of these initiatives have made it on to the ballot. In your proposal, if the second of the initiatives with a $1 extra survives, we can deal with this for 1 year, and then we'd have to make some adjustments going forward. Did I hear that right?
100% correct.
Okay.
We have any other questions from the? We have
I got
Mr. Parsons, yes.
I got a question for you, Dick. What do we do with this information? Do we?
Well, there's really not a lot we can do right now. Cliff has provided it to us, and in our deliberations of reviewing the budget, this will be a contingency issue that we'll be interested in. So Cliff has presented, I think, to me, to quote Frank, I think a pretty viable option here. He's kind of thrown up a red flag for us that pay attention here, because this has all the earmarkings. If you don't do something about it, there's going to be a crisis.
So as a committee here, do we need to agree to this contingency plan and then give a recommendation to the?
No, I
governing
think that's
board,
just
or-
part of our deliberation. Be part of our. We have anyone, and do we have any other questions in the committee? Do we have anyone in the room that wants to ask Cliff a question? Do we have anyone online, Christine? No, we don't? Okay. Cliff, thank you very much. So at that, there's no recommendation here necessary. This is informational for us. We're going to go ahead and proceed to our next agenda item. This is going to be an open discussion. The item that I have identified here is it's the proposed FY2024-25 operating budget review. Cliff, I don't know if there's any opening comments that you want to make about this, because the entire intent and the entire purpose of this agenda item is to provide our committee with opportunity to discuss, to review, to question, to whatever we need to do. So if you want to kick us off, be more than welcome. If not, we've got some points that we can start with.
Yeah, I would say let's, dig in. It's been presented 3 times at 2 different BNFs and a governing board workshop. And I think today and Thursday, I'd be happy to bring any takeaways and incorporate those into a next presentation or answer any questions that I can answer here today on the spot.
So there's no changes from the last time?
Yes, no changes from last time. There will be some based on recommendations that came out of golf. I'll say that golf committee was very receptive to our proposal, and they recommended to make a couple of changes. The one change, all to a positive impact in terms of revenue. The one change they are recommending is taking and aligning the guest golf rate with the public golf rate. We currently have a roughly $2 difference in those areas. So that would basically have an impact of the proposal of increasing it $6 to our public. The original proposal had a $3 increase to our guests. To align those rates to be the same, we would essentially take the guest rate up $8. So the public rate would go up $6, the guest rate would go up $8, and then we'd have 2 rates that were the same for guest and public. We still need to have those 2 separate rates because of how we have to account for Arizona TPT tax, sales tax. So we'd still have to identify public golfers, even though it was the same rate, so that we could properly charge them sales tax at the time of the transaction, which gets remitted to the state. So that'll have an impact. The other is a smaller impact. They wanted to put an increase in for our controlled neighborhood play card, a $25 increase, raising it from $1,575 to $1,600. Those were which is a very small impact, but those 2 would positively impact the revenue in golf by roughly $120,000 by doing that. And then there are some other operational things that we're working on that on the expense side that would also have an impact, and those will be presented at future dates, but no death blows or real changes to the budget.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'll start here. And again, I want this to be an open opportunity for our committee to question, to ask questions, to ask for clarifications, to provide suggestions. And I'm just going to go ahead and start on page 3 of the PowerPoint. It's the Recreation Center's assumptions and the financial plan and budgeting. Okay. So I don't really have a comment here other than I think this is an ideal opportunity to look at, these are some of the key drivers that we use in both determining revenue and in our expenses that go with it. So I'll open the floor.
It's the budget packet he's talking about.
So Cliff, if I could start, Dick.
Dr. Miller.
The health insurance, you say budget is estimated at 15%. If we went back and looked at the last 3 years and we looked at what we estimated in the budget versus what the reality was, how well do our estimates track? My sense is not very well.
Yeah, so there's 2. So when we do the budget for our health insurance, there's basically 2 drivers. There's the increase that gets put in for 6 months that we know about, because we have a 6-month July through December. We know what the prior year expense was. We know what the increase that was put in, so we have a good wag on what that increase is going to be. There's the forecast of what we think the increase percentage will be the following year. We don't know what that is until we get until like November. So there's that. The other driver there is the census. So how many people are going to be on the family plan? How many positions that are open now are going to be filled? And how many of those positions do we anticipate are going to take on or are going to use our company insurance? So, for example, if we fill a position and whoever we fill that position for now, if that person's spouse has a health insurance plan and it's better than ours, chances are they're going to be on their spouse's health insurance plan. But they could take our health insurance plan. And then what type of health insurance are they going to take? Are they going to take the employee spouse, employee only, family plan? So there are some changes. I would say that we're pretty good, since I've been doing it, pretty good at anticipating and forecasting.
So you think the 15% is a realistic number compared to what it's actually going to turn out?
I do. We had 35% last year. This year we had a 5%, but we know, and Scott Ragland from Levin Touche stood up here and answered a question of, I think it was from you, did they just give us a good rate to get us on board? Do you anticipate them raising that rate next year? And I believe he said yes. And based on our claims that we've experienced, our experience rating on our current claims, I think 15% is adequate. Is a good number.
Mr. Bosak?
A couple golf questions, Cliff. Last year, our total revenue in golf was about $11 million. I'm looking at your plan this year, and the rate increase obviously takes us up very significantly where you're projecting the year end. Mm-hmm. And when I add that together with about 90% of ancillary, which is what about that much of that is golf and the rest is other places. Merchandise sales, you're actually decreasing, and from, 3 years ago, we were 155, and I understand that's a net number, so it's a gross profit. 155,000, now it's almost half than that. Is there something going on there that is causing that? And then the food and beverage, probably half of that comes from golf. So I'm thinking $12.5 million for golf revenue, which over the last 2 years, that would be a really significant increase. So I guess the only one that is predictable out of all that is the rate increase if we retain the number of rounds that you've projected us at.
Yes. So
I guess my question is, how comfortable are you with what you've put together and what they've come back with, which we haven't seen yet?
With what? Who's
all elements with golf committee?
Oh yeah. So they were. I'm comfortable with what I have. I
Okay.
think 320 is our new number. I think
Okay.
that's our new number. We've 333, 326, 323 for the last 3 years.
3 years, yes.
And then we're on pace for, we're on pace for 328 right now if we hold the line. So I feel good about the 320. And is there some blue sky in there? Probably. But that's going to go in the reserve fund.
And then the other thing is, year-to-date revenues are up about 7%, expenses are down, up about 6%. You've said that you feel more positive than not with the rest of you. You see us holding those numbers through the end of this year so that the budget forecast that you've heard, the actual forecast that you have is a valid one?
I feel good about my forecast, yes.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Director Novello?
Same item, page 3 on assumptions, just a couple of quick ones. These seem to be the big assumptions. There might be a
Yes.
few others, right? Because if I heard it correctly, I think we conflated workers' comp and health insurance percentage assumptions. You were talking about Lovett and Touche.
Yeah, they do both.
So 15% for both is what you estimated?
Yeah, no, actually, workers' comp is going to be 35%. Yeah.
So would you consider just adding one more? I know it's a small detail, maybe just putting
Sure.
it on the same page. It's just
Can
not
do.
here. That was missing. The other thing that you,
we
and
have-
again, oh, go ahead.
Those are called out. They're not in the assumptions, but I can put them in there. Those are called out in the notables. One other notable is, and one other item that's going to impact the budget is we are in the probably 80% done now with our liability insurance, garage and liability, property and casualty. And unfortunately, that's coming in higher than we anticipate. So that's tracking around a 15% increase, which would be about 70,000. And I've built in a 9% increase in this budget, so we're probably going to have to move that up based on our
that
talks.
mirrors what's happening even for us, and individual homeowners. We're seeing our homeowner insurance, our car insurance, just insurance markets in general.
I can't wait to do the presentation on this. This will come out in April. We'll have Brown and Brown here. It'll be a very good meeting. I can't wait to enlighten the community on what's going on with that. But a lot of outside forces pushing that. And even with that said, we went to market, and we're unable to get a better rate than we have with Philly at this point in time. So we are still finalizing it. So we're still looking at the plan, looking at ways for savings. So, but we'll present all of that.
If you could, in the future for all the committees and the governing board, the assumptions page, even if you just put a call out there that these are key assumptions, so it's not exhaustive, or make the notables and the assumptions just kind of sync those up so that.
Okay.
They're just a few, like the workers' comp was missing. It's not a big deal, but just for those of us with short attention spans.
Okay.
The other thing to ask in terms of an assumption, it came up, one of our homeowners brought this up as a question as well, and a couple of them actually around the rec center pricing. We've seen a little softness, right? So I don't see any assumptions about ticket pricing or volume of tickets or anything. As you do the analysis in the next month or two, would you expect there'd be some impact here, or?
Yeah,
could
we're gonna analyze our events budget. I have it budgeted at 300 based on this year. We're gonna probably have to adjust that, so that'll be another adjustment in the budget, and we can put some details into events and ticket sales there.
Thanks. A lot of this is, you guys you have to live with this every day in terms of managing these risks and, what happens to these assumptions going forward. So we'll just have to deliberate, as you were saying. But I don't see anything here that's really massive. No one wants to entertain a dues increase, but the way that all of this has played out for me, anyway, I don't have any questions about where that dues increase proposal came from. Right. I don't see any other softness or ways based on all the questions we've asked. Unfortunately, our hands are tied in some of the things that I wanted to recommend, right, that would require technology improvement. But so we'll have to just defer those to further study.
Mr. Magnato?
Thank you, Dick. I'm looking at page 4, or slide 4, and all divisions on the upper left, and I take that to mean a consolidation of the golf division, general and administrative, recreation, and the sports pavilion, correct?
Yes, so essentially what was presented today, February year to date.
So on page 4, which is the all divisions, I'm seeing a budgeted number for legal and professional for the coming fiscal year of roughly $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when I look through golf division, 30,000 of that number is going to golf. I don't even see a line item for general and administrative when it comes to legal. And then recreation and the sports pavilion, there's no money allocated for legal and professional. So where did the $250,000 come from that appears on all divisions?
Well, that should be in general and administrative, so I don't know why it's not.
Huh.
To answer your question, but let's see. I didn't see that.
And I'm not questioning the size of it. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
huge number,
Yeah.
but I'm questioning, where is it being allocated to?
That line item, that category is missing in general and administrative. Good catch. That should be allocated there.
So
That's why it's not showing.
If you
I don't know if
put
it's
it
hidden
in,
or where it is.
if you put it in general and administrative, it's gonna reduce the numbers below that line.
Yes.
How is that going to go back? It won't go back and
It-
affect all divisions.
No, it
correct?
won't. Yeah, it won't. It's just missing in that division, but
Okay.
the all divisions has it, so
All right,
it's
so you'll
it's in
fix
there. Yeah, we'll fix that.
All right, hop to it. Thanks, Cliff.
Will do.
Thanks.
Good catch. You're good at catching those things. I should have you review everything.
Miller?
So Cliff, going
Yeah.
back to golf again. In the past, we have struggled to track, as I remember the discussion, we've struggled to track truly outside play from guest play. I believe we had.
Prior to January 2023, yes.
Okay. So we're talking about a fairly substantial change in terms of rates for public play,
Yes.
whether it's guest or whatever. And I'm kind of cycling this a little bit. I mean, last year, in my opinion, we made a very arbitrary reduction in the rate of golf cart rentals of $2. And the reason was, well, because things are so expensive for the outside players.
Mhm.
That reduction cost us $50,000 in revenue, according to someone in the back of the room who told me that number.
Okay.
So I'm kind of back to, okay, personally, I think that was a mistake. I think we took money out of the community that we really didn't need to. And I would suggest that perhaps that whole point needs to be, I know the golf committee didn't raise that again, but I think they ought to take a look at that again as putting that $2 back on the rental fee. That would just bring that money back into the community. So.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions from the committee? Do we have any comments from anyone in the audience? Okay. Mr. Leas, if you would go to the podium and give us your name and your RIC number, please.
Good morning, Bruce Lees, 135422. Appreciate all the work that the committee has done today, as many things I've heard were positive. I do have a couple of comments, though. The proposed increase of 5.6% to members' dues has been presented along with a $200 increase in the APFs. I'm asking for someone to please identify how these increases were determined, what formula was used to arrive at these numbers, and who or what party was responsible for putting this proposed increase into the budget recommendation.
I would like to answer that question, but I'm not going to. I'm going to permit Cliff to answer that.
Okay. Good question. Basically, we start with our operating budget. And so with our operating budget, the mandate we're given is to present a budget that currently provides the services that we provide. So tell us how much it's going to cost next year to do what we're doing, essentially. So we do that. We put that budget together. We build assumptions into the expense structure that, things that in addition that we'll need. We also, pull out items that we don't, special projects, things like that happen every year. A large component of that is the reserve fund as well. So we anticipate how much we're going to need in our reserve fund based on our R&R spend on the capital side and our new capital that's coming through our committees and operations in the community. When we do that, we take a look at, with all of the things that we're going to pay for, additional costs as well, what do we need, what's the impact on how much cash inflows that we're going to need? And we make a recommendation on dues. We take a look at what that dues impact would be in the current year and future years if we were to implement that. And then we, on the APF side, we also increase those because the things that the community is paying for currently and has been paying for however long someone has lived in this community, whoever moves into the community needs to buy into that. So we also look at that as well. And then that all rolls up into our fully funded balance percentage, which, by the way, is the only metric or the only KPI that's called out in policy is 40%. So when we do that, we make a recommendation on what we determine, operations determines, and then that recommendation is brought through committees up to the board and then approved or changed or modified and then approved at the final in May.
So my simple understanding is that the budget, or excuse me, the finance team, your team, and the operations team led by the general manager are the ones that work that and then forward it to budget and finance and ultimately to the governing board?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I noticed on the summary sheet of expenses that the wages and such were fixing to increase $840,000, which happens to be coincidentally the same amount you're expecting to derive from the $30 per head increase in member dues. So, I mean, is that just a simple correlation?
Mr. Elias, I'm going to ask you to finish your question.
Thank you.
Because your time is up. But finish the question and we'll respond to that.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay.
And I still have 41 seconds.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm looking at it the wrong way.
Okay. So, yeah, that's kind of a coincidence. I would say that in the current year, the dues increase proposed of $30,000 does not generate $830,000 in income. We have about half of that coming from the prior year. So when we implement a dues increase, we get half of the impact in the current year, and then whatever the other half of the impact is for the last 6 months, calendar months of the following year, we get the impact in that year. So, because they were both roughly $30, it's essentially $400 coming from both years.
Okay, thank you very much. If I may make one more comment with my remaining time. I would like to offer a proposal regarding the pickleball monitor station at the Palm Ridge Liberty Courts. In lieu of purchasing a shack to house and monitor and the ancillary associated costs with manning that shack, I suggest the committee and subsequently the board explore the purchase of electronic access gate structure that could achieve the same monitoring of access without the need for a monitor shack, additional electricity, and eliminate the need for a physical monitor at this location. There are many options available to purchase electronic access control systems which can integrate access, body count, time of use, and everything, etc. And then also solar powered options are available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Elias.
I will say Russ and his team are currently looking at solar.
Yeah.
So we are looking at that. It's not anything that's going to impact this budget, but we can certainly present that when it comes to light. No pun intended.
Okay. Give us your name and your rec number, please.
Uh, 131,829, Nick Turner. Just a very simple question, and I know that the amounts of money involved probably don't affect the great scheme of things, but are the costs for the billiard room within the sports pavilion budget? Because to me, they probably should lie within recreation, not within the pavilion, because there's no revenue from there, and it is something which is kind of funded from recreation.
They're in the sports pavilion budget. I would say the largest expense there is roughly $8,000 a year for 5 to 6 resurfaces, felt resurfacings. That's the largest expense. Of course, there's utilities and things and such. They do draw some very small amount of guest fees, but yeah, it is in sports pavilion. So not a ton of expense, but also not a lot of revenue either. Certainly significantly less.
Thank you. We have questions on the internet. Christine?
We do. We have a question from Gary Bach, 135435. Why are we putting approximately 1.1 million from dues into reserve fund when APF goes in? How do you come up with 1.1 million?
Mr. Swan?
We essentially model that out. Can you bring up the modeling? So in the past, I would say we started collecting APFs in 2002, I believe, 2003. Before, the reserve fund was strictly funded from operations. There was no other cash inflow to reserve funds when it came to members or people moving into the community. Over time, the APF has been a great thing because what it's done is allowed us to bolster our reserve fund, and having those people who move into the community buy into the community, so to speak, and pay to be able to immediately start using the amenities that have been paid for and borne on the backs of people who have lived here for decades or even years. So with that said, if you took this and went back another 10 years, so projected 23 to actual 2013, you would see historically from operations, we've put in double than what we're currently proposing to come from the reserve fund allocation. So, which means we would put in 1.8 to 2.2 million per year from operations, strictly coming from golf sales and member dues, sports pavilion and events and things like that. So it's based on the modeling of what we have coming in through APFs and what we need our reserve fund to be, because remember, the reserve fund percent of 40% not only covers the repair and replacement of our 100+ million in the cost of our reserve study assets, it also funds new capital. So in the modeling, you'll see 1.8 million per year in new capital. This year, we've had roughly 300,000 in new capital. Last year we had roughly 300,000 in new capital. In this year's, we got a little over $1 million, which is new capital and allowance. So new capital is really 600, allowance is 400. So it's just, we take a look to answer the question, to summarize all this, we look at the modeling and anticipate what our APFs are going to be and determine how much we need to come from operations. And that's how we determine the 1.1 million. And that's what we model out. You'll see I've modeled out 1.5 million because even though we budget 1.1 million, sometimes, we track better than budget. We have at least over the last 5 years. So we do increase that a little bit. I hope that helps. Hope it answers the question.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
I had one more question.
Okay, go ahead, Christine.
My apologies. I had one more question as well. We don't have any other questions online. When I was asking about the rec center events and so forth, all the other committees that we have, the standing committees, have the opportunity to give feedback on pricing and assumptions and so forth. There's no committee that weighs in that I'm aware of on any of the special events pricing and volumes. Is that?
That's correct.
in our copious free time, would you come back with some of those assumptions? Maybe we can give a little feedback on those.
Yes, I took that
once you
down.
have the study done.
Yep, that's a takeaway that I took from earlier. Yep.
Parsons?
Yeah, concerning special events too, I'm not sure if outsiders pay more than members for special events, but as part of your evaluation, if they don't, you might want to consider doing that, because we do that for golf. Why not special events?
Okay. They do, don't they? Yes, they do. And we'll put that in.
So,
Yeah, most of the tickets now, I will say they bring in guests, so we don't really know if a household could buy up to 4 tickets. 4 per person. A household can buy up to 8 tickets. So, yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead. I think I'd like to give the board or the committee an opportunity for their last comments. Mr. Bosak?
First of all, thanks to you stellar folks for sticking with us all this time. You're always at our meetings, and we appreciate your attendance and your involvement and your questions, truly do. Bruce, if you look at the page 4, Cliff, if you could pop that up there again from your presentation. Our 2 levers we've said for a long time are dues and golf. And so when you look at the right-hand column, budget versus projected 24,467,000, and then go down to the expenses, 1,471,000, they almost offset each other. And when you look at the salary and wages, 1,105,000 next year over this year's projection. So if we don't make up through either dues or golf rates, we'll have a negative number on the bottom, just because the way they're stated now, they almost offset each other. And that 1,000,001 is what we've been dealing with almost year after year after year, if not more. And we understand all the whys with the minimum wage and all that sort of thing, but there's no intention to try to do anything other than create an achievable, accurate, livable, balanced budget. And over the years, we have increased the accuracy and we've improved the performance of how that goes together so much more than it was mirrors and guesses. And I mean, no dispersions on previous folks, but these Pete and Cliff and their team have really lent an entirely different level of accuracy, due diligence, and thought that's gone into these budgets. So it sure made our job a lot easier than previous budget and finance committees, but the numbers are just ballooning so far out of control on the expense side. If we don't do this, we're going to wind up in the bucket that Sun City's in, where they didn't increase rates, dues for 5 years. And this year, it's up 10%. And their CFO said, not enough. We're going to be looking at that for the next few years. They've got millions of dollars that they need to spend, and they don't have the money because of that. So no one wants to raise dues any more than they absolutely have to, but we need to preserve the level of service that we provide in the community and the quality of the facilities. And those are really the 2 goals that we're always protective of. So again, appreciate your interest in the way you look at things. You're very analytical, and that's helpful to us.
Dr. Miller?
So this is getting toward the end of the second year that I've been on the Budget and Finance Committee. It's been very entertaining, to put it mildly.
Minutes.
Yeah, put that as a quote. So,
Hey, I'm getting paid to be here. You're not.
Entertainment for Miller.
So one thing that I continue to have a concern about that I don't see, in my opinion, being adequately portrayed in any of the budget requests is our IT systems of the future. I mean, as we debated credit cards, we heard we can't do that, it's going to take us a long time, we're captive to our software provider, yada, yada, yada. Bruce brought up the point about electronic monitoring. Well, gosh, that goes back to how does it integrate with an IT system? Personally, I'm going to make a suggestion that I think the governing board needs to create a working group to look at the IT system that Sun City West needs for the future. It's not going to get simpler, it's going to get more complex as we move forward. when I was looking at the material and I looked at $225,000 to refurbish a bar, I would much rather take that money and put it in to try and figure out how do we provide better, faster, more comprehensive electronic services, whether it's the library, whether it's monitoring, whether it's whatever, for the community as a whole. So, that's kind of my soapbox speech. I've been mulling this for quite a while. It's really something that needs to have more attention paid to it than we currently do, in my opinion.
Mr. Davis?
I will only echo the appreciation I have for my esteemed colleagues' input, and I will be the quiet one on the committee.
Director Novello?
Echo my colleagues as well. Echo your sentiments, Dr. Miller, about technology. I feel like I'm a broken record on that point and on strategic planning and so forth, but without us commenting, there's no way to improve. So on that note, I just want to thank you and your team for taking the time and opportunity to improve the visibility on our metrics, to improve the visibility on changes. We've had a presentation about budgets in every one of our meetings since September, because this is budget and finance. But you guys have taken when I say you guys, you and your teams have taken the opportunity to show us where the changes are, show us where the challenges are, and really wanted to just thank you. I know I've been giving you a hard time now for several meetings in a row, and today was no exception, but it's done out of care for the community and a care that I know that you and your team share. So thanks for taking the time to walk through all of this and for listening to all our feedback.
Parsons?
I'll echo that. I know tracking all this information takes a lot of time and effort, and you're doing a great job. It's great information.
Mr. Bignato?
No, I actually have a question for Dr. Miller. David, when you talk about the technology, are you speaking of hardware or the enterprise software that runs the community?
Both.
Okay.
Ms. Kellis?
I'd like to echo what Dave said also. We have got to take a look at our IT department and get some of our money possibly allocated over there. We've run into that several times this year, that is a problem within Sun City West. And other than that, I'd just like to say, Cliff and your team, thank you so much. This was a great presentation.
Thank you, Lynn. You're welcome.
I do want to make comments myself as well. All I can say is I think the elephant in the room is, to me, it's our IT system. I think that, and this is not to be disparaging against anyone in IT, because I think they have done an absolutely marvelous job, but I believe we need to go to the next level. I come from an environment where we would have our IT people and we'd say, just flick a button and do this and go do that, and they'll go develop it, because they had the resources and the facilities to do that. So anyway, I am an advocate for that. I also want to say, and this kind of echoes what some of my colleagues have said, Cliff, I think you and your staff have done a marvelous job in presenting a proposed budget. We're going to snipe at it, but I assure you that it's, as Christine would say, this is in everybody's best interest. We'll do that. But I can't say enough how clear and how responsive that you have been with our questions and formatting and helping us understand. So with that, I want to thank you very much. We have one person from the audience that I see that wants to speak. So if you will please identify yourself. and your rec number, please.
Gwen Rhodes, 125-791. I'm just going to make a couple of quick comments and giving a little history. A year and a half ago, in October of 2022, our Director of Library Services, and if you haven't met her, She is one of the outstanding employees in this community. She gave a great presentation. So if you're on the governing board, please take the time, part of you are up here, please take the time to go back and watch October 2022 Governing Board Workshop. She talked about what she sees across the country with libraries and how to stay relevant, how to bring our new people in, and how to have libraries be relevant, not what the libraries of the past were. And it was fantastic. You watched the board of directors, they were all enthusiastic and interested in everything she had to say. Well, in this past fall, we got the sticker shock when the general manager, using his allocation of funds, found some prices out for us. And it's looking like it's going to be somewhere between $4 and $6 million if we want to do that. So that sticker shock, hit us all. At that point, when the Budget and Finance Committee saw that presentation, Mr. Bosak made an excellent recommendation. And he talked about the fact of, why don't we as a community, let's put some money out there to look at what we as a community can do. Don't go through budget and through our annual budget, but figure out a way that we as a community, through our budget, can get some involvement going on in how to do endowments, how to have fundraising. I'm a member of one of the clubs that, because it wasn't an R&R, we had to find our own money for a new project that we had. And within 4 months' time, and it was at that point a small club, it's a huge club now, but at that time we came up with $10,000 to the governing board to tell them, if you give us this land, this piece of property, we'll do this with it. So what Gary talked about, Mr. Bosak talked about at the time, was figuring out a way for our community to fund this. Oh, my time is up. So again, 8 years ago, we spent $2.3 million on a tennis court, and a lot of frustration for people at the time, but we did it because we knew it had to be done. It's an asset. It's beautiful in this community. You take your friends up there. We got a couple of hundred people that play tennis, but you take your friends up there and look at that, and that's pretty when they come to visit. So think about it for our library. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Yes,
Nick
sir.
Turner, 131829. When people talk about IT, I'm sorry, I just can't keep quiet. I worked for a company that got together with 5 regional furniture retailers who were not competing with each other, and they all primed the pump and paid in advance for software to help them. And that was the first software that resulted in those companies saying to people in their store at 6 o'clock in the evening, you can have that sofa in your living room by 10 o'clock tonight. There's an opportunity, I believe, with retirement communities across the United States to set something up like that. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars as well, hundreds of thousands per community in order to do that. But I agree with Dr. Miller, let's have a working group, let's have a look at it. The IT we have here is well looked after, but it's showing its age. I know that a neighboring community did an audit of its IT and found that it had some hardware that was unsupported on software systems that were unsupported, and they had to upgrade those. And as they upgraded those in a hurry, they ran into some technical difficulties and things stopped working for a while. We're not in that situation. We do the best with what we got, and I think that's a testament to the professionalism of the management here, that they are doing the best with what they've got, but it's getting to the point where that's not going to serve the community anymore. So we have to take a good look, be prepared for sticker shock, and move forward and build for the future.
All right. So thank you very much. I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 12:01. So thank you all. Our next meeting, our next meeting is April the 2nd. I believe it's April the 2nd. It will be at 9 in the morning in this room. The only agenda item on it that we have right now is the 24-25 budget, because we've done everything else that we need to do from a mandatory perspective. So Thank you very much, everyone. 3 hours and 1 minute.